What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another HR Heretics segment. We have longtime friend, second time caller, third time caller, maybe, David Hanrahan. What's up, man? Welcome back to the pod.
Good to see you both again. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
All right. So, David, you and I are coming off a Transform.
hmm
And I think I want to start with what's your take? Like, how was this year's conference? What'd you think about it?
One thing that Transform does that you can't say for a lot of. By the way, full transparency, I kind of help them. I'm on their advisory board, so I'm a fan. Transform is a lot of fun. So they do a really great job of making sure fun. Sometimes, if you're in HR, you deal with a lot of stuff that's not fun. So, like you're at Transform and you turn your head and all of a sudden there's people with bagpipes coming down the hallway, like sort of channeling in you a direction where there's like wine, wine and beer, where you're on the expo floor and like, are those puppies? Are those puppies running around the floor over there? And, like they have almost like a talent show mentality. Like at the last part of the expo hall on Wednesday, they had someone, Peter Phelan, doing like a comedy hour, and like there's a lot of stuff they do there that I think is really creative, particularly when you think about expo halls at conferences can kind of be this like dead, depressing thing where it's vendors and like all the people who are attendees don't want to go in there because they don't want to be sold stuff. And Transform is very clever in terms of now they actually have events going on in there. So they'll have like live podcast tapings, or they have an actual like I saw Lori Rudiman was interviewing Pat Waters like just on the expo hall floor. And so that's really clever. And I think that there's a lot of sessions. So it's like if you get overwhelmed with just the sheer number of things that are in topics that have sort of like very ornate kind of framings, you can get overwhelmed by it, I think. My thing, and Transform does a really good job of like kind of creating like a fun, positive vibe. It's in an awesome hotel. The Wynn and Encore is just like, wow, this is awesome. One thing, like my mini rant on conferences, and like maybe I get successful in sort of bringing this up with the Transform team, or maybe I'm not, but I want to go to a conference where there's like an element of like tension or debate, or like I'm going to watch a panel and these two people have a completely opposing views, and it might get a little bit uncomfortable. Like it might be like a business leader who's debating an HR leader on a concept that like, is maybe something where HR and then the leaders are at odds, maybe, or there's something changing here in terms of how, like businesses are thinking about a concept, and we need to debate it. Because I think what can happen is in a lot of these panels, it's a friendly atmosphere. Like we're all sort of like, there's people just know each other, and there's a lot of like, say, like the similar mentality, the similar ways of thinking. We all think the same way. You could be on a panel, and I'm guilty of this, where down the row, the panel says on a question that's asked, I agree with everything that person just said, and you kind of feel yourself sort of like slinking back in your chair, like falling asleep a little bit, because it's like, okay, well, you're all going to be apparently saying the same thing. And I kind of want to hear people, kind of take different sides and stuff. And I heard that a little bit, but I think it's just something I think conferences can do better.
Yeah, and you were a part of the advisory board, which is great. I've been Transformed since they were tiny, kind of liked it when it was a little smaller, but it's great to go for community and connection. I mean, it's like everyone goes and there's this and that. I have heard the panels are getting a little kind of, I don't know what the right word is, polished, corporate, kind of scripted, like, and it's kind of like the antithesis of why we created Heretics, right? Is like, I want to see this shit on stage because that's what I learn, and that's real life. So I have heard it's kind of less real life-ish as far as the breakouts and the panels. Did that show up at all as you all were architecting this? Like, did you push for that? You know what I mean? Like the grittiness of our jobs.
I was on a panel with Tiffany Stevenson and Jackie Canny from ServiceNow, and Jeff Diana was moderating it. And, I think there's a natural tendency for the moderator who's kind of stepping in to like, sure, I'll moderate a session. I may or may not even know much about it, but I'll get a good group here and sort of create a sort of a safety, it's like a safe mindset of this group who are being asked to step in on something and kind of create a sense of comfort. And that, maybe we can do better as moderators to find where we disagree and find those moments versus, sort of orient towards creating a harmony on this so that everyone's comfortable stepping in on stuff where sometimes we actually don't even know each other. I did hear from one person who pulled me aside, says we need some more like better moderator tools and tactics to surface better conversation. And by the way, sometimes they're really compact. a 30-minute session can go by so quickly where one of the panelists only gets to say one or two things, and then you're done. So it's kind of hard if the panel is short.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, and it gets harder when you're more successful. Like, I give Transform a lot of credit. It's big, it's successful, and there's other things to balance when you hit those points, just like we have to balance, right, Nolan? Shareholders, boards, revenue, and employees. So yeah, I was just curious how it played out, but it's definitely hard to balance.
Well, let me give you my learning. So, like, number one, clearly the best thing about Transform is everybody's in the same place. And so that means, like, you can see people and you can build depth in relationships that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do on Zoom, on text, on phone calls. And so where it really gets valuable is, like, you go to these dinners, you go to coffee with people, you're just talking in the expo hall. And it's just another reminder that in-person relationships have so much more depth than any other form of relationship in our lives. The second thing I would say is, like, there was kind of a theme of talking to some folks who have ascended really fast in their career. And the theme is the best people are risk on and they are betting on themselves. And so time and time again, as I just kind of think about, like, I was having this conversation with Emerson, who's the head of recruiting at a firm, and talking to Emerson, it was just like, what are you doing? How are you thinking about stuff? And he just said, I just keep, like, betting on myself. I was like, that's such a good point. And then I took a step back and was, like, talking to these different people. I was like, all these people do that. I think it's just a common thread. And it was a good reminder for me. Other things is, like, Kelli, I heard a lot that people are listening to our podcast. And I think you and I, like, the joke that I have is, like, oh, my parents, my wife, and your wife listen to it. And that's kind of feels like who I'm talking to sometimes. But the reason why they're listening to the pod is exactly what David just talked about, which is we're saying the things here that people want to talk about, but they don't actually feel safe talking about them. And that is a really interesting learning, because HR people, right? Like, we want to create safe spaces. Like, we want to, like, encourage dialogue. We want to make sure people can show up. But it does seem like the pendulum has swung to where, David, I think what you're actually getting at here is people are scared to have difficult conversations amongst their HR peers. And I think a big reason why is because of the political moment that we're in, of the stuff that we've gone through over the last 5 to 10 years, and candidly around cancel culture. And so when I was talking to some folks and I was like, yeah, like, the cancel mob has, like, come for me like 3 or 4 times on LinkedIn. Kelli, like, people are like, why are you still doing this with Nolan? Like, that's happened a few different times with us. And David, I think that's what's showing up right now. And I think there's a desire now, you saying it unprompted, we didn't talk about this beforehand, of you wanting to have more of these disagreements. And it turns out, disagreements are healthy, right? It's like, we want to be able to listen to each other, to understand the other person's point of view so that we can update our own thinking. Versus, I do think there's a little bit of homogenous thinking right now in this space. And I think that's the thing that we need to continue to improve upon, to create spaces to where people can disagree without fear of getting canceled.
Yeah. The last thing I guess I'll say on that, and hell, I'll be honest. Like, I went the last couple times, but I didn't find myself kind of, like, engaging with the agenda, if that makes sense. It was more to curate these types of conversations you just described, Nolan. So, and I think that's why we did this podcast. That's the conversations I have. And I have kind of this dream where maybe we create a gathering or like, I want to create something where people don't look at their phones. Like, they're so into it and they're getting real shit from it, and they're having really uncomfortable, vulnerable, hard conversations that you don't see one person scrolling. Like, that's kind of my litmus test with stuff. And I think that does happen there for sure. That's what we need now. That's what we need for people to stay sane in this job.
Heretic Con.
Well, Nolan and I talked about, like, hell, do we travel the country and do 20-person, 15-person, like, spill your guts roundtables and how to do this job well and how to screw it up? Like, I don't know what it is, but anyway, I applaud Transform. It's a great community session. It's a great place to gather.
It is. And they're totally killing it, by the way.
They're killing it. Yeah. they have global chapters now, and it's got a brand and it's got a vibe and it's going to be multimedia. So they're killing it. But yeah, I just get really interested by disagreement. That's like, if you're going to watch a podcast that sometimes goes on for like 3 hours, some podcasts out there go on so long because these two people are going at something and really investigating. So anyways, I think there's going to be interest for that.
Last question. Did either of you win? I mean, I couldn't go this year. I've got FOMO on Blackjack craps. What was the deal? Did we play?
Oh my God. So I was up and then gave it all back, but I did spend probably like 6 hours at the table with 3 other conference attendees who will remain unnamed right now. But that's what I mean about the relationship depth. Like you sit at the blackjack table with somebody for that long, like you really learn about some people and like really what's going on with them, which was cool.
And full disclosure, I coached someone who went there. I'll save their name, but I literally told them to go to the roulette table and put 100 on black, and I'd Venmo them one way or the other.
And this is during March Madness, so you're there, and like the basketball games are kicking off, or at least towards the tail end of the conference. So
yeah, okay. So David, you started a new role, and I want to talk a little bit about how that's going and how you're doing and what it's like. We just talked to Colleen about this a week or two ago. So 2 of the besties now are like back in the game in new roles. Like, what's your story?
Yeah. Well, I got to meet Sudhakar, who's the CEO of SolarWinds. He's now been in place for, I think, about 4 or 5 years. And he's been leading this transformation as SolarWinds is a 25-year-old SaaS company. They're in the IT observability space. And I have to say that because sometimes people think it's a solar company or a wind company. It has nothing to do with solar or wind. But they've been on a bit of a transformation tear, and earnings and companies talk about being rule of 40. SolarWinds is rule of 50. So they've been incredibly successful more recently in creating a high margin business, high profitability business. And but that's sort of like there's 3 pillars of this transformation that they've been going through. And when they met me late summer, kind of what we talked about was people was like the next big part of the transformation, continuing to up level, bring in the next wave of talent, invest in leadership development, which we can maybe talk about, invest in like the business partner function. It was they said it was a team that was in need of new leadership. And like, cause the leadership team, the executives all were really thirsty for good sort of strategic, proactive, like HR business partner guidance, like, digging in with them in their org design. Little did I know at the time that actually about 2 or 3 weeks after I joined them, we were going to be acquired. So, we're going through a process.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that.
It hasn't closed yet, but a company called Turn River met the SolarWinds team a little bit before I started. And there was an intense mutual interest because Turn River is a PE company, but their interest in SolarWinds is growing the business, because they said, look at this company you've built. It has incredibly high margins, but we think we can take some of that, your muscle on margin, and turn that into top line growth and become an even more valuable company if we kind of make some changes on go to market. And so, but the thesis being growth. And so that's in process right now. And if it goes through, it's a really positive story for a lot of the employees here, but also be really interesting for the next wave of talent of joining a company that in Turn River believes we have massive future potential to grow. So, but anyways, that happened. It's like surprise. And I'm like, I'm trying to also like hire a team. So 60 days in, I come in and I've got some pretty significant areas of my team where I need to invest. One of those, and I think Nolan and I talked about this at Transform, I need a head of recruiting. So shout out anyone listening. I actually got to interview a candidate on the conference room floor at Transform. But I think for me, I've got some really good pieces in place in my team. But like, yeah, it's I need some pieces around me to feel good. For right now, I feel like, and this is what happens oftentimes when a new leader takes over, is like you got a flood of stuff coming to you because there's some pieces missing there. So I'm not operating at the strategy level I want to be. I'm operating at a sort of like putting my fingers in the holes of the dam, all over the place. and going home like with a headache, but nonetheless energized to come in each day. But it's a lot.
I think you and I are like twins now as far as, 60 days in. We're getting acquired and you're like, I don't even know where the restrooms are, let alone give me every document of everything that happened here and tell me about this place. It was insane. It's a whole nother level and it's a great experience to go through, but it's exhausting. Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
I must admit, I used to believe that AI didn't actually exist in recruiting or HR. That is until my friend Heather Doche, who leads talent at Signalfire, told me to check out Metaview. I got into the product and was like, wow, AI actually does exist in recruiting, and this product is sick. Metaview is the world's #1 AI scribe built specifically for recruiting. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes everything. With perfect notes from every conversation, your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates, and they can save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Metaview covers all your compliance needs, works with all your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at organizations like Brex, Deal, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts. Tell them that me and Kelly sent you. Or you could just go to their website and get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI enabled in minutes.
One thing they didn't tell me I didn't anticipate is I've been on G Suite my entire career, G Suite and Slack, and I started and we're on Microsoft Outlook and Teams, and this has been a big learning curve for me. I spent about 2 weeks just figuring out how I can create a folder in Outlook, and I'm like I've never felt so dumb as when my first 2 weeks trying to navigate Outlook and Teams.
So David, with you're describing something that I think is very real. When you start a new job, pieces typically aren't in place. That's why they're hiring you. And you have to be able to basically do everything while building relationships, while getting quick wins, while building your team. How are you juggling that?
For me, I think I got to set proper expectations. And we had an MBR the other day where every third MBR, I believe, or in the month is when the G&A teams get to present. So 1 hour each quarter, people team will present an update. And almost like within the 20 minutes before, like we had my slides, from someone on my team, Francesca helped me pull some slides together. But I had this feeling that I was about to walk into this MBR and I'm like, I'm not going to be focusing on the right stuff if I kind of just go through these slides. So I need to like time out and then just talk about the people success team org and like an evolution and basically, tell them like, I'm not doing a good job right now. Like 60 days in, I'm not operating at the level you need. Here's what my vision is for the people team in terms of how the recruiting function looks, in the next chapter in terms of, adding proactive value with every search, using data and analytics, and investing in advanced systems. The HR business partner team, what does it mean to be a strategic business partner versus kind of more operational? Talent development, how I think we need to be building talent development programs that actually solve business problems instead of stuff that we think, kind of makes sense at the highest level. Comp, people ops. I painted this picture of like, we're not at where I want to be 6 months from now, and certainly not where I want to be 12 months, 18 months from now. And so I need to like buy time so people understand that like, I've got a lot of things I need to put in place before I can start to unlock greater value. And here's what some of that looks like. I think I might have been reading Katie Burke's her self-reflection that she put on LinkedIn. I think I might have read that right before I stepped in there. she basically kind of showed, like, I think she's like 90 days in maybe at her new job at Harvey, but she kind of was very hard on herself in a way. And I think when you do that, you build trust, that like when someone kind of can be the first person to say it is the person themselves, the leader, like, hey, I'm not where I need to be yet. And here's some things I need to improve on. You build trust, but you kind of buy yourself time, because people know, like, okay, you have a higher bar and we know where you're going.
I love that.
It's such a good take because you're preempting what they're thinking. And by doing so, you're showing self-awareness, and you're able to express that, like, you're not meeting your bar, but not only not your bar, but also their bar. Right. And so then it does buy trust, and then it allows them to opine on it without them feeling like they need to give you feedback because you gave yourself the feedback.
Yeah. And one of my questions for you, David, was going to be, I mean, we've had, a few runs at the CHRO thing, and multiple times we've integrated into companies. And I was going to ask you, like, did you do anything different this time than maybe, three times ago? Have you learned new things as far as what to do more of or less of? And I asked that, and I just realized, and I'll give my answer, I guess, is 10 years ago, it was like you jump in and you start doing stuff and you're doing work and you're getting the wins and you're putting out fires. And what I guess was missing for me that I've done the last few times is like doing that to a degree, but having a point of view on the map, and getting folks connected and zooming out to be like, here's where we were, here's where we are, the good, bad, and the ugly, here's where we're going, here's a realistic picture of what that looks like and means, how it's connected to the business. And so I think just taking time to your point, buy yourself time by saying, here's the map of the mall. I'm going to be realistic about what's going to go well and not right now and why. And it does gather transparency and buy-in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. Maybe a couple of things. I feel like at one of my first head of people gigs, I didn't move fast enough on some painful changes that were like obvious right off the bat, that people would talk to me about, like coming in and like, hey, this is probably going to not work out over here, and over here you have someone where there's maybe a change. And early in my career, I was too slow on that stuff, and I've maybe moved towards maybe in another opposite error-prone direction of moving too fast, which means that I've got like things falling to me now where I've made some changes that, like, this is going to be messy, but and I talk to the CEO about it and I say, hey, here's what's going to happen when I do this. And it's going to be a little bit messy for a while, but I'd rather just move towards like being fast on it. When I know I'm confident, I don't need any more information on this change. So that's something I've done differently that can feel a little bit like less empathetic, or can feel like, you're not doing enough diligence, and it's because it is messy here, and then there's a messiness that spills over when you suddenly got a lot of direct reports, more than you think you should have. But anyways, something that I'm trying to do that I maybe didn't do enough of early in my career is I'm trying to get out to all our sites. So I'm kind of doing a bit of a world tour. I was in Manila with the CEO. And to his credit, that was his suggestion of, hey, come with me on this site, because I like to do Ask Me Anything. Sudhakar likes to do an Ask Me Anything, and just 1 hour unstructured, just anyone can ask questions, snarky or like really good or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of bold. You want me to stand there with you? And I'm doing that in Manila. I'm gonna go to Ireland and Brno, Krakow, and eventually India. And it's hard when you have a lot of work to do, when travel inherently, like, it takes you away from your computer, your ability to actually do interviews. And I need to be doing interviews. And like, how am I going to do that when I'm in the plane, multiple hours each week? But I think that's important to build culture. I've seen chief people officers before where they didn't get out of the office, like they kind of stayed too much in one place. And to build trust, to build those relationships, I got to get out to where people are having different experiences than I'm having in Austin. That's something I'm trying to do. And I confess I'm struggling with it because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. It's funny how those small things, like I'm at Quizlet in an interim role for a while, and I literally like don't have a desk. I just like sit in a different place every day and move around. And it's amazing, just through serendipitous kind of connections, you get stuff done and get to know people, you're visible, and that kind of stuff just travels. So it's interesting.
David, we wanted to talk a little bit about L&D. So I think L&D is in a weird moment right now. Feels like a lot of companies are cutting back on L&D still. Like it's no longer a priority. What's your take on where it is today and where it's going?
Yeah, it's a good question. It relates to a topic I was on a panel on about how do you secure budget for important people initiatives in tight markets. I think I go back to when I was at Twitter. One of like the sort of like most impactful moments in my career was being there in a few weeks in. Dick Costello pulled a couple of the people team members, myself and Jan, and a couple people together to say, I want to build a leadership development program. And here's my ideas. And he just had this like these notes on like a few pieces of paper that he printed out. He just like, okay, so here's my idea. And like, here's how I think we should be talking with each other. He started writing the sort of matrix that eventually became Radical Candor, because Kim Scott was actually in the room listening to this at the same time too. And he just started like writing these notes of like, these are these concepts. And as you listen to them, they're like, oftentimes they're not necessarily like brand new concepts, but they're important. And they're things that are sort of indicative of that, how that CEO looks at the role of managers, and is chatting with the people team about it. And like, there's like the leader and the people team are aligning on, the CEO and the people team are aligning around some concepts that all we need to do, if we align on these, then we need to get them in a room together and start talking through it, maybe doing some exercises. And it didn't involve any money. It didn't involve paying for anything. I mean, it was time. It was the CEO's time. It was, like we have others people's time that we have to sort of get this together. But it was not about money. And I think there's sometimes this mistake that when we think about like L&D or leadership development, that this is going to cost us a lot of money to do something right. And I think, in fact, where you pay external people to come in to teach your people, whether it's leader development or whether it's something else around like how to communicate effectively, unconscious bias training has this phenomenon where it's interesting stuff that oftentimes doesn't drive behavior changes. I think for me, the most effective leader development has always been the stuff that we've done in-house and not actually paid for. All that said, I'm thinking of this right now because it's something I got to do at my company. We're as we go through this transaction, this acquisition, I know that things like change management is going to flex a lot of our leadership muscles. There's going to be two cultures kind of coming together where they might not see eye to eye on some things, or it might need some work to sort of like align as leaders on practices that we adopt. But it's going to be important. I think people teams live or die on the strength of the leaders around them and the talent in general in the company. As you raise talent, the role of the people team can up level as well. But I think this is something that we have to do. And the problem is leadership development efforts oftentimes fail. Like there's a lot of really like damning research around leadership development. Like here's an example is from some stat I just saw, 71% of companies express concerns about a lack of alignment between leadership development efforts and business strategy. Less than half of leadership development professionals measure behavior change. And instead what they measure is more of, did you like this program, like the net promoter score? And I want to think about this in a way that actually is meaningful. And so, I think it's a big challenge in the industry to make leadership development actually work.
Yeah. So somebody called me 2 weeks ago and they were like, hey, love the podcast. Like, can you come to my company and do a manager training? And I was like, sure, I can do that. But like, what problem are we solving? And so then once we started to get into the problem, it was like, well, like there is an alignment on, what great managers look like. And I'm like, well, if I come in, I'm not going to just like come talk to the managers. In fact, like I'm going to start with the leadership team and I'm going to ask them what they think good management looks like. And I think there's a desire from people who just want to like make the problem go away, like throw money at this problem, but I actually think, David, what you're getting at is there's actually really hard work here that needs to be done with alignment and what do we stand for. And a lot of this stuff is actually cultural. It's not just like, oh, like let people like go learn Excel and stuff like that. That's not what this is. This is like, how do we manage as a company? How do we think about leadership? Like, what do our great leaders look like? What are the common traits of those people? What are the behaviors that we do not want? And getting to alignment on those things actually takes a lot longer than people want, because they want to just be able to like check the box, bring in life labs and make it go away. And as somebody who tried that at Carta unsuccessfully, my biggest learning is like, you have to do the hard work of aligning with your C-level team, because if you don't do that, everybody's going to be like, well, okay, I know how to do a one-on-one now, but if my CEO doesn't give a shit about that, it makes no impact in the company.
Yeah, 100%. I was sitting in a meeting with our executive team a few weeks back. We were going through the promotion proposals for all those at director and above. So our leader promotions, like who are we trying to promote at what level? And at like multiple points, there was like, we need a rubric around this stuff. Like, what is a good leader at these different levels? And, one of my team members was like slacking me, like, David, we have 3 of these. We've put 3 of these out here in the past. So we don't know shortage of them. But the question is alignment. But how do you make this stuff also like omnipresent? That like, oh yeah, this is the sort of pithy statement. This is the sort of like the 5 things that we want to see from leaders at each level or in general. And it might change. It might change as the company goes through a different chapter. The things that we think are important next. Right now, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to do a little bit of like take an investigative approach, take a curious approach. Like we asked, when we were in that session, hey, at this level, who's our best? Who's our best level? And then a name gets thrown out. And I say, okay, we got to go investigate, like, what is that person doing? And then the next level. In the next engagement survey, we're going to ask just a question. What's one thing your manager does that enables team success? What's one thing that your manager does that hinders your team success? And then segment that by like, not only engagement, so like the green managers and then the red managers in engagement, because you can sometimes have a high engagement team, but they're actually not high performing. So I don't buy that pure high engagement like all the time equals high performance. I want to segment that by not only the high engagement, but they're known to be high performing in the company and the manager's doing something there, and start to break it down by tactic level. And then sort of work backwards towards the principles. Like how do those translate to principles and make it resonant for us versus, okay, you copy and pasted something from Radford on what they say on leadership, at each level. That is so generic, you can barely distinguish it between director and senior director. So, but yeah, I'm kind of taking a curiosity first approach on this to start. And what I want it to be is it's not mine, but it's theirs. So that's the people team's leadership development framework, but like they're owning it. And ideally, we even get to like a sort of leaders teaching leaders moment, like, well, who is the best person here on, setting effective direction, and have them teach this thing.
So I'm totally aligned with you. And I love the idea of like starting with the top performers, trying to deconstruct what they do, and then essentially like taking those learnings, applying them across top performers, and then just basically showing a mirror for like, this is the behaviors and the skills that we really like. And these are the ones that we don't. As your friend, you're 60 days in, the thing I worry about is like, is this like amorphous, long-term project, the thing that like isn't easily defined? Is that like one of the things that's right for you to take on initially?
Could be. It's a bit of a BHAG for me in terms of, I think it's really critical for us, but like all the research, how leadership development often fails because it's not aligned to the business strategy. Like you're not focusing on the right things. It was too hard to get alignment, et cetera. Yeah, I worry a little bit. I worry a little bit that like this might become something that takes up a lot of time that we're not able to actually move forward. I've had that happen before. I've had that happen before where I have leadership development on my objectives list for the whole year. And at the end of the year, I'm like, did we do anything with this? What did we do? We talked about this. We talked about it 4 quarters in a row and never did anything. Like, so I'm worried about that, but I'm kind of chasing it as a bit of a BHAG.
Yeah, it kind of feels like one of those things that everybody knows is important, but there's never anything like super urgent to drive prioritization. It always kind of like, and then even when you do talk about it, now that I'm actually riffing on this right now, is it feels like the thing to do is to like carve out special time to where it's like, we're only talking about this. Like, this isn't just like an agenda item in the leadership sync. It's like we have a sacred space to talk about this thing. This is why this is important. This is why we're going to dedicate time and make it a huge goal for the company. Because for me, when there hasn't been like that driving moment to be like, go make this the thing, even though everyone knows like we need to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of like if left to your own devices, this is something that we can probably comfortably, punt and kick the can down the road. And so it's going to require some strong alignment and dedication to actually make it something that's meaningful, or else you got to shelve it. But anyways, well said.
Totally. All right, man. Well, always great having you on. We'll have you back in the next couple of months. We'll get the 120-day progress check-in. And then as always, guys, if you have any feedback, let us know. And also like with L&D is a great topic. We haven't really gone into this a ton. And so if you guys have a firm stance on L&D, we'd love to hear from you and love to learn what you guys are doing at your companies. So thanks so much, all. HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.